Today we are going to take up the causal body. We have seen that there are three bodies. One is the gross body, the other is a subtle body, and the third is called as the causal body or the Karana Sharira. The question being asked is Karana Shariram Kim? And the answer is Anirvachyanar Avidya Rupam Shariradvayasya Karanamatram Satswarupajnanam Nirvikalpaka Rupam Yadasti Tad Karana Shariram. Yeah, please mute the others. Please mute the others. I'm still able to hear some disturbance. Can I do that from here? No.
You can, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, have you muted everybody?
I muted. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. See, what is the causal body? That which is inexplicable, Anirvachya, Anadya, Avidya Rupam, Shariradvayasya Karanamatram, Satsvarupa Ajnanam, Nirvikalpaka Rupam, Yadasti Tat Karana Shariram says. What is the causal body? That which is inexplicable. But it will still remain as an attempt only, and it will not be explaining anything much unless one is able to consciously function in that body. One will not know the nature of this body unless one is consciously able to function at that level. Then the second issue one has to understand is that it is beginningless, anadya. I'll come to that. Then it is also in the form of avidya, that is ajnana or ignorance of the reality. Then it is the cause for the other two bodies, for the gross and subtle bodies. Now, the inexplicability part I have made it clear because technically speaking, it is not like the gross and the subtle body. It's not a body as one can imagine or understand down here as one sees and understands the physical body. Even the subtle body itself is something which is invisible to us, and we are unable to know the nature of the subtle body completely. So when it comes to the causal body, it is totally unknown in a way. And then it is beginningless. Beginningless in the sense, there are two issues to it. This causal body is said to be something which persists from life to life. Throughout the number of lives a human being takes, this causal body persists. So you cannot actually look back and say that it has begun at this particular point. In that sense, it is beginningless. The other sense in which it is beginningless is it is cyclical in nature. It is cyclical in nature in the sense once it is formed and it assumes what is called as a body as such or an embodiment. In that sense also you cannot identify where it has actually begun. So both in terms of space and time, you cannot pinpoint and say that this is the beginning point for the causal body. And the causal body is not one body only. It has three components to it. it has three components in the sense it has what is called as the higher mind or the urdhva manas, then the buddhi, and the atmic principle, the principle of the atma. So the atma, buddhi, manas, all the three put together form one entity which at the lowest level of the higher manas has a semblance of a body. I hope I am making myself clear. See, just as the gross body is there, and there is a pranamaya kosha and a kamamaya kosha or manomaya kosha, those three form one unit. And you are able to function and see only the gross physical body and not the other two bodies or the sheaths associated with that body. Okay? So the point to be remembered is a similar analogy is to be understood. In the same way, you have to understand that the causal body is composed of three aspects. The abstract mind, or what is called as the higher mind, which is closely attached to the buddhi or the buddhic plane as such, and then there is the atmic principle also acting through it, and therefore the atma buddhi manas or manas buddhi and atma, that makes it MBA to remember. The acronym MBA is the higher manas, the buddhi and the atma. These three together is what is called as the causal body. And as I mentioned, you cannot trace it backward, or you cannot see it, look at it and say that it has begun at this particular point of time or space. So in that sense, it is beginningless. The other aspect is, it is also a body which is a result of avidya, which is a result of avidya. Therefore, it has the avidya rupam. Avidya rupam in the sense, the cause of the body is avidya. Once a small ray of the highest principle descends, when it comes down, it is enveloped in ignorance. That means it recognizes itself but is unable to recognize the reality. It is quite close to the reality but still unable to recognize it. So now imagine, what about the physical body and the other bodies? They are much, much far away from the reality. When the causal body itself is engulfed in ignorance, the gross and the subtle body are much more involved in ignorance, and therefore they cannot know the reality. In a different context, I think I have mentioned that the whole manifestation comes out of ignorance, or what is called as maya or avidya. That is the beginning point in one way. In the sense, the very descent into manifestation is by the envelope of maya, which is twofold. Maya operates in a twofold manner. One is the maya shakti. It's called as the avarana shakti, or the power of veiling the truth or veiling the reality. That it means it puts a cover on the reality. It completely covers the reality. And it doesn't stop there. Having covered the reality or veiled the reality, it now projects what is not real. That is called as the Vikshepa Shakti. Vikshepa means to throw out. Having veiled the reality, it is now projecting the false, projecting what is not true, what is other than that reality. If that is more convenient, it is something other than that ultimate reality, or the what we normally call as the supreme intelligence or the Brahman. So it is acting in a twofold manner, Maya, Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti. It is veiling the reality and projecting the unreal. That is why Adi Shankara goes on to emphasize that the whole Jagat is Mithya. Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya. Only Brahman is the truth, and the whole Jagat is Mithya, is false, is untrue. But we can't say that sitting here, sitting in unreality, without any realization of that reality, I cannot claim that this world is unreal. In fact, this world is much more real for us, and the Brahman is unreal because we have absolutely no clue. We have absolutely no knowledge about that Brahman. So, how can something which is about which I have absolutely no knowledge or no realization in any form, how can I claim that to be the real? For me, this is real. But the fact of the matter is, we have to see the nature of this reality which we are talking about, in which we live. The nature of this reality, essentially, we see, is constantly changing, modifying itself. There is nothing permanent here, neither in the case of objects, nor in the case of persons, relations, thoughts, feelings, emotions, ideas, concepts. You can take any of these things and examine them closely. You find that they are constantly changing and they are impermanent. What is impermanent, by definition, cannot be real. The reality is something which exists and which is always there. Nobody brings it into existence as we understand down below here. It is of the nature of Sat, Chit and Ananda. That's why they have called that the manifested Swarupa of the Brahman is pure existence, pure consciousness and pure bliss. Sat, Chit and Ananda. So therefore, the inability to recognize that, reality is on account of avidya, which is an aspect of manifestation itself, and it has the dual role of veiling the reality and projecting what is not real. So that is why it is called as avidya rupam. And Shariradvayasya karanamatram. This is the cause for the other two bodies. The causal body compared to the gross and subtle bodies is something which is permanent in nature. Permanent in the sense, it persists from life to life, life to life. It is the repository of all the experiences one has through all the lives. It is the repository of all the experiences. But one important thing to be remembered is, there the experiences are not recorded as experiences or stored as experiences. They are stored as the essence of the experiences. Essence of the experience means several experiences together will give you a characteristic. As an individual, it gives me a certain characteristic which I call as a samskara. So in the form of samskara, the essence of my experiences is stored. The Karana Sharira is the repository for that. This is the important aspect to be remembered. The essence of it is retained. And another thing to be noted about the Karana Sharira is, nothing impure can touch it. Nothing which is of the nature of selfish desire drawn through the senses and experienced by the gross and subtle bodies cannot touch that causal body. The causal body continues to be a body wherein the essence of all the experiences which are useful from a spiritual point of view are retained, not from the worldly point of view. The worldly point of view, whenever you take a birth, the corresponding worldly nature will get attached to the bodies, which are called as vasanas. So one has to distinguish between what is a vasana and what is a samskara. A vasana is the grosser or the impure aspects of our experiences, which are temporarily dormant when these bodies die. But as and when a new body is created, these vasanas get attached to it because they have to undergo their experiences and they have to exhaust their karma down below here in the gross and subtle bodies. And therefore, they get attached as and when a body down below is created, as and when a gross body is created. But as a Karana Sharira, nothing impure can touch it. But remember that it is still on account of this body, is on account of ignorance only, ignorance of that ultimate reality. Therefore, he says Satsvarupa Jnanam. It is unaware of its true nature, true self, the self with a capital S. So Satsvarupa Ajnanam. And Nirvikalpaka Rupam. Nirvikalpaka Rupam has to be understood as the duality which operates down below here as the me and the not me, as the separative principle which we experience on account of our mental faculties. I consider myself to be separate from everything else. However close I may be to anybody or anything, I am still not that. That aspect is not there in the Karana Sharira. Karana Sharira, which includes the Buddhic principle, I am talking of the Buddhic principle from the classification that is given in the theosophical literature, because there is a purpose for that. The Buddhi that is normally discussed or described from the Vedantic point of view is referred to as the intellect. But the Buddhi that is referred to as forming a part of the Karana Sharira is a faculty of unity. For the first time, anyone who is able to consciously function in the Karana Sharira or the causal body will experience the unity of life. The unity of life will be experienced for the first time for a person who is able to function consciously in the causal body. For all of us, the causal body is there, but we are unable to function in that causal body fully and consciously, and therefore we cannot experience what is called as unity. That is the idea which is being presented here when they say Nirvikalpaka Rupam, free from duality or division. So technically, though it may be my causal body, but it is not individualized in that way to say that it belongs to a particular person. It's only a repository of a particular person. Like we can give an example of a bank's vault, safe deposit vault. It's a big room in which hundreds of lockers are there. A particular locker is yours. But the whole thing is 1 volt. So the causal body can distinguish only in a functional way, but not in any structural way. In a functional way, the causal body recognizes that yes, I belong to so and so, or this causal body is linked to this particular Atma which is evolving. That's a functional differentiation. But structurally, you can't say that this particular thing exclusively is for me. Structurally, it is integrated into the whole consciousness of humanity. That is the reason why one feels one can experience unity.
Sir, could you
It is
please
precisely,
elaborate again once the same thing?
yeah, see, the causal body functionally can be distinguished as belonging to a particular person or a particular entity, which we may call as the evolving Atma, which has these three bodies. Functionally, it is attached to a particular evolving self. But structurally, it is not separate. Structurally, it is integrated into the whole of human consciousness. So once you go to that level consciously and function in the causal body, you can experience that universal consciousness, that we are all one. It is not conscious of the ultimate reality, but it is conscious of the fact that I am no different from you and you are no different from me. We are all one in consciousness. That is what is called as the unity of human consciousness. And that is why it says it is free from duality or division. There is no duality there. It is one. Functionally, yes. Functionally, it is linked to a particular evolving self, which has a gross body and a subtle body and also a causal body. This is the nature of the causal body. This has to be clearly understood. And in order to gain any experience or understand anything fully, the causal body does not require any other instruments like the physical body. The physical body requires organs of the senses and organs of action. The Jnanendriyas and the Karmendriyas are required for the physical body in order to garner experiences. But the causal body, it does not need that. The second Buddhic principle, one Buddhic principle I have mentioned about, which forms a part of the causal body, is the experience of unity. The second most important thing is, if you are functioning consciously in the causal body, all knowledge is readily available for you to understand completely and at one stroke. Completely and at one stroke. The technique there is called as knowing by becoming. This is an occult maxim which says knowing by becoming. That means if I want to understand a rose, I become the rose. If I want to understand a bird, I can become that bird. If I want to understand somebody, I can be, because I'm a part of his consciousness and I focus my attention on it, I can fully and completely understand and gain that knowledge. The knowledge acquired by the gross and subtle bodies are by definition partial, limited and fragmented. They are partial. You cannot have complete knowledge about anything down below here. However great a scientist you may be, however great a researcher you may be, and however much work you have done in a particular field, nobody can claim omniscience, or nobody can claim that I know the entire thing about a particular subject or an issue or a thing. Because by nature it is partial. Similarly, its field of operation is limited because the senses are limited. We know that there are some animals who have much better senses of sight or hearing than us. So they see much more or they hear much more, which we are unable to hear. So therefore it operates in a limitation. And the other thing is, mind cannot grasp anything totally. It can only grasp in bits and pieces, and therefore we are fond of doing analysis by breaking things into pieces. But if you ask all the things to be put together and created, we can't do it. We can do dissection. We can go on breaking it into pieces and try to examine the pieces, but we are incapable of putting together the pieces. That is the nature of the. Whereas in the case of the causal body, when it comes to the faculty of knowing something, you have the facility of becoming that thing to know it completely. Isn't it? If I can become the rose, is there any secret in the rose which I cannot understand? Because I am functioning there consciously and in a way better than the rose. The rose by itself may not be able to understand completely because of the limited consciousness functioning through the plant kingdom. But for a human being functioning at the causal body level, he can completely grasp the knowledge of the rose as an example, and thereby you are in a possession of the totality of that knowledge because you have become that. But this is the beauty of the causal body. So these are the two aspects which has to be remembered. The sense of unity is achieved or attained or realized for the first time for a person who is capable of functioning consciously in the causal body. The second thing is, if I want to know something, I can simply become that. This is this is how the yogis and the saints and sages acquire knowledge about things. Lot of discussion goes on. How did the ancient Indian sages and saints and seers know about the precession of the equinox, which changes by 1 degree in every 21,600 years? How could somebody gain that knowledge? Today they have instruments to observe. Today there are methods to calculate. There are things available which through which we know about the precession of equinox, which there's a slight movement or alteration for every 21,600 years. But this was known earlier to the sages and saints as far as the astronomical subjects that are available, texts that are available. This is the process that is adopted here. If I want to know the precession of equinox, I become the precession of equinox and I'll know how it functions. This has to be very clearly understood because the Atmic principle is connected to this. Why is it that this knowledge is available to us and this unity is available to us? Is because the Atmic principle is connected to the causal body. If the Atmic principle were not to be connected to the causal body, it would not be able to function with these two faculties of unity and becoming, knowing by becoming. This is not spelled out in the Vedanta or Vedantic text. I am drawing, as I said, this particular aspect which was dealt in detail in the theosophical literature through clairvoyant means. The clairvoyant research and clairvoyant exploration that was done has revealed these things, and Madame Blavatsky herself gave this knowledge in the Secret Doctrine, quoting the relevant references from the ancient scriptures of the world. So we take this as the explanation for the functionality of the causal body. Okay? If at all any body is to be imagined, it only functions at the higher mind level. The other two levels, or the other two Buddhic principle and the Atmic principles, do not have a body as we imagine or as we understand, because they are only sparks of light of the divinity. The Atmic and Buddhic principles are sparks of the light of that divinity, which is operating through the causal body, whose main location is at the higher mind level. It is basically at the Vijnanamaya Kosha level. it operates there. So this is the nature of the Karana Sharira. Though it is steeped in ignorance, though it is unable to know the reality in its fullness, because an Atmic principle is functioning through it, it is able to know this. And very clearly, the very first term they say is Nirvachya. It is inexplicable. All the explanation I have given is only a mere explanation. The reality of the causal body cannot be understood down below here. See, anything subtler cannot be understood by the grosser one, isn't it? The subtler can understand the grosser, but the grosser cannot understand the subtler because the grosser vibrates at a frequency much lower than the normal frequency of the subtler aspect. In nature also it is true. The subtler can encompass the grosser, but the grosser cannot encompass the subtler. Therefore, we cannot have a comprehensive knowledge of the Karana Sharira unless we are able to function at that level. That is the reason why it's called as Anirvachya. And also it is Anadya. It doesn't have the same kind of beginning or end as we have for the gross bodies. The gross and subtle bodies have a certain lifespan and they are destroyed after that lifespan. But in comparison to that, the causal body will be living for aeons, for thousands and thousands of years. In that sense, it is beginningless. It is still avidya rupa. It is the cause for the other two bodies. It is ignorant of its true self. It is free from duality or division. And that is what is called as the Karana Sharira. I hope the issue is clear. If there are any questions, I will come to that later to talk.
There are some questions.
Yeah, shall we?
In the chat box, you can see.
Yeah, 1 minute. I'll go back to it and go to the chat, this thing, and see. How do we experience unity by functioning through the causal body, which is born of ignorance? Binaji, I have mentioned, no? It is able to understand the unity of consciousness, not of reality. It's able to understand the Chit principle.
Yeah. So it's the Chitta, no?
It is the Chit principle which it is able to understand. I'll not go into the Chitta aspect of it. Chitta is the mind stuff that involves another discussion. But understand this. I mentioned two things. One is because the Atmic principle is linked to the
Correct.
Causal body, it is able to experience unity of consciousness, though it is functioning in ignorance of what? Ignorance of its true nature, which is the ultimate reality.
Okay.
Okay.
Got
Now,
it.
Janaki Ramji, another question is, any information or knowledge is required to bring about change or improvement in a person who is keen or passionate to evolve. So how this learning about causal body can be applied for personal growth? Thanks. Now, the point is very simple. You have to do sadhana in order to function consciously at the causal body. That should be the inspiration. The learning of this principle, learning about the causal body should inspire one to open up that channel, and function consciously at the causal body level. And the only way is purification. The only way is self-purification. Unless we purify ourselves, the connecting link with the causal body cannot be opened. The channel can be opened only through purification, or what the Bhagavad Gita calls as Atma Shuddhi. All karma, all actions should be focused towards purification only. That is the only way. There is no other way. The purification. You have to purify yourself. Each level of purification will open the higher and higher dimensions. See, the point is simple. It's a question of vibration. If I improving my frequency levels and if my capability to vibrate at higher frequencies, I will be able to come to it. Now, if my desires, my selfishness, my emotions, my anger, my jealousy, my envy, my hatred, if they are pulling me down and making me vibrate at a lower level, at a gross frequency, how can I go beyond it? I am bogged down here. You know, see the reason for giving up all these things. It's not for just to become a good person. No, we should be good. Good not from the social point of view or from the ethical point of view or the cultural point of view. It is an imperative. From a spiritual point of view, it is imperative to drop all these things once for all completely. Not for the just becoming a good person or being recognized as, no, he is a very noble person, sir, he is a very good person, sir. That has no meaning at all. From a spiritual point of view, worldly recognition as being good or noble has no basis at all. The point is, if you and I want to vibrate at a higher frequency, at subtler vibrations, the only thing is I have to get rid of my grosser vibrations. It's all a matter of energy balancing. It's all energy. All these bodies are condensed energy. It is a functioning through that. Therefore, the learning about the causal body should immediately inspire you to get rid of the impurities. Get rid of the impurities. Then automatically we'll be able to function through that. Yes, very much true. Kanchi Periyar used to function at Karana Sharira level. You discuss deeper nuclear science with experts. Yeah, because all knowledge is open for them. All knowledge is very clearly open for them. It is like keeping it in a store. They need not store it in the mind. As and when required, they can simply draw it from there. They can simply draw it from there. So that is what is available for us. See, Atma is part of causal body, so it is. So is that also enveloped by ignorance? Is that what we call Chitta? No, see, the point is, Atma and Brahman are qualitatively one and the same. Functionally, they have become separate.
Right.
This separation has happened because the principle related to Atma has descended into a grosser level of vibration.
Yeah.
So once it descends, the features of that plane of existence will envelop it also. The factors relating to, the aspects relating to that plane of existence will envelop it also. Therefore, it becomes ignorant of its true connection.
Okay.
So that is why they say only a ray descends.
Right.
That ray descends to the monadic level. And the monad again, only a ray of the monad descends down. And further, only a small aspect of the causal body or the Atma Buddhi Manas triad reflects down below. Down below, it doesn't even descend. It's only a reflection. It's a chaya matra. It is purely a reflection. And therefore, it is unreal. It's like a movie on the screen. The screen, you can equate it to, say, your causal body or the Jivatma aspect of it. Okay. So anything that is played on the screen is false. As somebody was mentioning, see, the violence on the screen, the bloodshed on the screen,
Correct.
does it touch the screen? Once you switch off the projector, the screen is pure white. There are no marks of the blood or the gruesome violence that has taken place on it when something was being projected.
Right.
So that is the nature of it. See, one more aspect, Beenaji, one has to remember is they are layers and layers and layers and layers of truth. By definition, the ultimate reality is infinite. Once you reach one level of,
Yeah.
consciousness, you see that there are more layers of consciousness to be explored. Once you go beyond that, some more levels of consciousness, some more levels of reality are unfolding. So this is an infinite process because by definition it is infinite.
Correct.
Can the causal body be compared to self-consciousness in simple words? No, sir. No. It is not self-consciousness as we understand down below. This is from Mr. Prakash. See, it's not self-consciousness. Self-consciousness is you are conscious of the fact that you are there. That you are there. That is an inbuilt mechanism which functions, which is again only can function when there are instruments. What happens to that when the instruments are dormant? For example, when somebody is asleep, is he conscious of his self? No. See, we cannot make the causal body too simplistic. The causal body is a very subtle body which is complex in nature. What you are talking is conscience, antaratma, that which pricks you. That means there is a sense of right and wrong in you, which is over a period of time by the samskaras that have been acquired, generally gives the human beings that sense of conscience or a sense of what is right and what is wrong. That is also related to the self only. Because if you see what happens is if you do something wrong 10 times, what happens? Your conscience is killed now. When a fault is committed, there will be an inner instability in oneself. How long? See, committing the first murder may be very difficult. Afterwards, second, third, fourth, 10th murder, you're not even conscious that you're murdering people. You're simply saying that I want something from him, and because that fellow is not giving him, I'm killing him. I want his property. I've asked him to write, transfer his title to me. That fellow is not listening to me, so I murder him. This is how the real estate operates, isn't it? The mafia. So 10th time, there nothing pricks you. You don't even feel unstable. In fact, if you don't murder somebody, you may feel unstable on that day. This is the problem with the human psyche. If you allow that vibrations, the higher vibrations to manifest through you, you will become more and more sensitive. If you don't allow them, you will become more and more gross. The causal body evolves at its own level. At its own level, it evolves. Once you link up these three things, the gross, subtle, and causal bodies, if you are able to seamlessly integrate them, then you are able to function at a much, much higher level, and the dimensions of truth that open up to you are quite vast and immense. That is the nature of the causal body. Hope I am clear. Yes, sir. Then can we go to the next slide? Yes.
There are a couple of more questions.
Where are they?
They're here only. There is one which is, I think Umeshji has asked you to repeat about born out of ignorance, but he may have got the answers after you.
Yeah.
Can I, sorry.
Yes,
The
please.
question was when you said that Supreme, when the higher self choose to descend, and once it descends, then it is out of ignorance, and therefore it is.
No. See, once it chooses to descend, we don't know why it has chosen to descend in the first place. We are talking about realms which we don't understand. This is only an explanation, number one. Number two, it's not. Once it chooses to descend, it will automatically fall into the category of that ignorance because it is now come into that plane of existence, which is the cause of, which is the basis for ignorance.
But
So
that is after having come down to this.
Yes, Yes,
Yes, but
yes.
it was born when it was fully conscious and fully full of knowledge, and then it chooses to descend.
No,
So
no,
it was born.
see, Umeshji, there is no separation at that level at all. See, the infinite is infinite.
Hmm.
There is no separation there. So that's why I said we don't know the cause of the whole manifestation, because those are questions which cannot be answered down below.
Hmm.
See, how come the infinite became finite in manifestation? We don't know.
Hmm.
I can give you some nonsensical explanation, but that explanation is not the truth. The fact of the matter is we do not know why. See, people ask, why this manifestation? Why this whole damn thing is created? Why we are put into this kind of trouble? Why are we suffering here? Is it necessary? If at all some God is sitting there up above, what is that fellow trying to do? What is that fellow trying to achieve by putting me into this problem? All these are born out of ignorance only. These questions have no relevance because they become irrelevant because you are limited in your understanding. But having descended, the descent itself is on account of ignorance. So therefore, it is bound by that ignorance.
Descent itself is out of ignorance.
Yes. When the limitation, manifestation is limitation. The unmanifest reality is infinite. Manifestation by definition is limited. So limitation also means ignorance only. When I come into limitation, that means there is something which I don't understand. Something which I don't realize. Then only you will say a limitation. No, otherwise it will be unlimited or infinite. Has it answered your question, Umeshji?
What was bothering me was this, that after it chooses to come down, as in Gita it says that it is out of my yoga maya,
Right.
Therefore it is unknowable, as you just said, that the cause of descent.
Yes.
But what was going in my mind is when you say born out of ignorance, that is what I'm going over again and again.
The manifestation is mama maya duratyaya. See, the Bhagavad Gita very clearly says it is out of my maya. I am the cause for the maya also. These are only, as I said, explanations. We are not in a position to function at the causal body level to understand the nature of the causal body itself. The yogis who have transcended the causal body also have realized something which is inexplicable about the causal body. And it cannot be understood at its own level also. At the causal body level also, it cannot understand reality. So therefore, it is born out of ignorance. It's a part of this whole ignorance process.
Which means it is again, causal body is not real. It is again.
Yes, it is not real in a way. Compared to that reality, it is not real.
Okay, though it is operating at atmic level, it is still not real.
Yeah, it is not real. Only a minute ray of that principle is operating through it. So that is why they say this is an undetached spark of the divine fire. It is an undetached spark. There is a connection, but it is a spark of the flame of that fire. If the fire were not to be there, there won't be any sparks at all. There won't be any jivatmas at all. The Karana Sharira is a part of that jivatma. The jivatma is a spark of the Paramatma. Without the Paramatma, the spark, without the Paramatma, which is the flame or the fire, the jivatma, which is the spark, cannot exist. Now, how they are connected to each other is something mysterious and we don't know. It's only an explanation. The explanations do not really explain anything. But we are trying to understand the functionality of this causal body. Understand the point?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank
Any
you.
In other words,
on
in
this?
other words, we can say causal body is just an imaginary body, right, sir?
Not a, see, imaginary, it's imaginary in what sense? Because you don't know it is imaginary. But at its own level, it is real. Can we say?
It is real. You said it is real, but not to the extent of reality.
No, it is not a part of that ultimate reality.
Reality, yes.
Yes.
So causal body is an imaginary body.
No, why do we add more confusion by adding imaginary? The word imaginary is adding to the confusion. What I'm saying is,
Okay.
it is one level of reality. The gross physical body is one level of reality. The subtle body is another level of reality. The causal body is another level of reality.
Okay.
As compared to the higher one, the lower is unreal.
Right.
As compared to the higher one, the lower is unreal.
Unreal.
So don't bring the word imaginary, because that will cause further confusion. As compared to the ultimate reality, the causal body is unreal.
Okay.
That's the only thing we need to understand.
Right.
Okay? Yes, sir.
Right, sir. Got it.
Shall
There's
we
just
go?
one last question by Venkatesha.
Yeah.
You missed out, so can you just complete that and everything will be over?
No, I'm not able to see that.
Can I read it?
Yeah, please, can you read it?
When the causal body, which is inexplicable and beginningless, is it possible then to regress to the past life or future life of an individual? And is that true?
Now, past life you can know when you when you are functioning consciously at the causal body level. That much has been clarified. But I'm not aware of future bodies. But you can extrapolate the future because you know what all you have done. From the causal body point of view, you can know what you have done. What is all the, see, you will be able to see the balance of your karma. So when you see the balance, unexhausted karma, in a way you can extrapolate what kind of life you will have in future, whereby you have to exhaust that karma. But that's only a hypothetical thing. See, knowing about past lives and all is a matter of curiosity. It's not something about being serious about the spiritual path. See, this is a siddhi. The knowing about past and future lives is only a siddhi. It's only an attainment on the way, on the path of spirituality. This is a faculty you may acquire, but not a very desirable faculty. What are you going to do unless we are very
No,
curious?
Krishnapali Kesaraju, his question is relating to hypnotic regression. People have been giving, reincarnation, hypnotic regression, past life.
Yeah, that part of it, I'm totally unaware. I'm ignorant about it. I have absolutely no knowledge about hypnotic regression, and the truth about that also, I am ignorant about it. I don't know.
Yeah, Jankiram sir is right. That was my point.
Yeah, yes, sir.
That is no. Jankiram sir was right. In hypnotic state, how one person can be regressed.
No, I am not aware of it, sir.
No, thanks for clear.
I am not aware of it, and I don't believe it in also, because there is a natural process of evolution. Okay, there is a natural process of evolution. It has been very clearly mentioned in some of the scriptures and literature that one should not subject oneself to these things.
Okay.
One should not go and subject oneself to hypnotic regression to know about your past lives, and that's immaterial. See, let us know our present life, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Present state. Why are we interested in all that past and other things of which, see, there is a purpose and a reason for keeping it hidden from us.
Yeah.
One cannot see if I'm capable of, say, operating at 220 volts, I should not put my finger in 420 or 440 volts connection.
Correct.
So let us not do those things, and it has been very clearly mentioned in the scriptures that never subject yourself to artificial ways of going backward or forward or developing some faculties.
Okay.
All faculties have to be developed by one's own effort. There's a very interesting case of a gentleman called Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner was born with certain faculties where he could see subtle bodies, he could see the auras of people, he could see so many things which the ordinary people were not able to see. That's what he had, clairvoyance and clairaudience. But you know what he did? Deliberately, he eliminated all those things by consuming certain substances which would dull those faculties. He eliminated that and developed all the faculties afresh and in a scientific manner again. The reason he told us is, what came to me as faculties by birth were not fully under my control. They were just coming and going, and things were happening in a haphazard manner on which I had no control. So I do not want such faculties on which I have no control. So he gave up those faculties. He deliberately made himself dulled to those faculties and redeveloped them again. So there is a natural process of yoga. In the Yoga Shastra, an entire division is focused on siddhis, what kind of siddhis one can acquire. But in the Yoga Shastra itself, it has been very clearly said that all these siddhis are great distraction on the spiritual path. They are great source of distraction. That is how all these minor, small magicians and small gurus and all, they manifest things and all. People are enamored by them, thinking that he is doing some great magic. It's only playing with some of the natural laws which are not known to others. So let us not indulge in those things. Let us not subject ourselves to hypnotic trances and all, regression and all. At least I personally, I don't believe in that, and I don't subscribe to that view, because my study, my reading, my understanding, and people from whom I have had interaction have very clearly dissuaded and said, you will go into the wrong path, to the left-hand path, or what is called as the Vamachara. You will go to the wrong, you will be dragged down into the wrong path. And there have been instances where they have said that in order to come back to normalcy, it may take hundreds of lives. In very exceptional cases, it may take several lives to get rid of that karma and then come back to normalcy. So that is not necessary. As and when you progress, certain faculties will be available to you, sir.
Okay,
once you are purified, once there is purification, the chance of misusing becomes minimal. But ultimate purity, unless there is ultimate purity, you will always have a chance of falling down. That is the great example of Vishwamitra. He does tapas. The moment he sees Menaka, he is back into the desire fold. Then they give birth to a child called Shakuntala, and Menaka is an Apsarasa. She is not concerned about motherhood. She simply vanishes, and they leave the child to birds. Is it a responsible way of behaving? Would a human being behave like Vishwamitra, where he would say that I had my enjoyment and the consequences of my enjoyment are not mine, because I am a yogi, I am a rishi, and therefore I'll go on my path. And the Apsarasa, my Menaka, says, I am not a human at all. I am absolutely not human. So I am not concerned with any human emotions. I have nothing like motherhood or fatherhood or anything like that. So I simply vanish and they leave it to the birds. And it's ultimately Kanva Maharshi who has to bring up Shakuntala. This happens repeatedly to Vishwamitra. Next time he is agitated and he is troubled by anger, he is troubled by jealousy, he is always in competition with Vasishtha. Then the example of Trishanku comes. This fellow wants to go to heaven with body. Those fellows did not permit him to come there. So he stops them in between and he creates a heaven for him by using all his tapas. Every time he uses his tapas, he is back to zero. He has to start afresh. So all these examples are allegorical in nature to teach us that unless there is that pristine purity, you cannot touch that level of reality where it functions only when it is vibrating at the most highest level of frequencies and highest level of sensitivity and purity. That's what is to be understood. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Then we'll, what is the time now? We have another 10 minutes. Yeah. These are very simple aspects of it. I think we have covered the major issue today about the Karana Sharira. He says, Avasthatrayam Kim. What are the three states of experience? Everybody is aware of it. Jagrit, Swapna, Sushuptyavastha. There are three: waking, the dream, and the deep sleep states. These are the three states in which we normally function. We are aware of the waking state, we are aware of the dream state, and we are aware of the deep sleep state also. But not when we are actually in deep sleep. When we come out of deep sleep, we realize that we have had a deep sleep. We have been in a state of consciousness where the self, the I, the mind, and all its components, including its desires, feelings, emotions, and all, were in a very dormant state. Such a state is called as the deep sleep state. That's also called as Nidra or Sushupti. Okay? Then Jagrad Avastha Ka. What is this waking state? Shrotradi Jnanendriyaihi Shabdadi Vishayaischa Nyayate iti yat sa Jagrad Avastha. Sthula Sharira Abhimani Atma Vishwa Ityuchyate. This is a technical term which I will not cover in this particular meeting. There are three technical terms which are used. Vishwa is used here, then Taijasa and Prajna. These are the terms which are drawn from the Mandukya Upanishad. We will go into these technical terms later on. But he is very simply defining Jagrad Avastha as where all the Jnanendriyas, the Panchendriyas which we have seen, the gross, the sense organs of sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, okay, these five, and the corresponding tanmatras or vishayas associated with that is the Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa and Gandha. These are the associated things. Shabda is associated with ears or sound. Sparsha or touch is associated with the skin, and so on and so forth. All are those things. That which is known through these things, that which is known through this experience in which the sense objects are perceived through the sense organs, is the waking state. The self-identifying itself with the gross body. Now, whenever, even as a child, when you say, when he refers to himself, he points to this gross body and says, yes, I am so and so. This identification with the gross body is given a technical name called as Vishwa. Vaishwanara is another technical term. We will go into the technicalities of it in the next session, where we can cover these three aspects of Vishwa, Taijasa and Prajna. We will come to that. These are, as I said, is a slightly technical subject, but we will stop here at the gross body level, where the identification, I identify myself primarily with my gross body. Generally, if I am hurt, I say I am hurt. Nobody says my gross body is hurt. We don't say that. Our language also has evolved in such a way where the gross body is given importance and the gross body is recognized as the me or the I. And therefore, I call myself with a particular name. I have a form, I have experiences and all that. All that put together, I am calling this as my body. But I am not aware of anything beyond that. And the identification of the self purely with the physical body is given the technical name called as Vishwa. We will go into the technicalities of it in the next, session. Next Sunday, we'll be able to go into it. So, if there are
may
any
I ask one question if we have time?
Yeah, please, Parth, tell me.
So, just combining, the previous sessions also and what you spoke today. something related to more about my day-to-life practicality, how to actually implement this or observe this. So speaking for myself, so I do have an inkling, a basic inkling that I am not the body, and I am not the thoughts. I can observe and understand that I am that that awareness to which or on which the body and the subtle body, the limitations have been put.
Yeah.
And while I am working, for me, why I'm interested in all the spiritual stuff is there are certain things which bother me. For example, I'm a very workaholic person, and I would want to finish my work before the deadlines. There are these elements of fear, there are these elements of wanting some appreciation, which I'm able to observe, and I'm able to, while I'm doing it also, I'm able to say, okay, this is still not me, and this is still that, the sanskaras or the subtle bodies which are working, and I'm not that. But that is one thing. Now coming to the practicality part of it, so sometimes the mind or the subtle bodies, they have a lever of option. They can choose what to do, what not to do. And other times there is a strong force, of that force that makes you do things even you might not like doing it. Now, though you can appreciate and say at the same time, okay, this is still not me, let it happen. But I don't know, like what should be the outlook? Should I use my will to stop doing myself from something, or should I still observe and let it go, let it happen, because it continues happening, it doesn't stop.
The point is very simple. Let's not complicate the issue. First of all, you try to understand to what extent your fear or the desire for appreciation is influencing your work or your activity, and not the nature of work itself. Is fear a major factor? Is appreciation a major factor? Is it that which is dominating you, or you are dominating that aspect of it? What is it that is dominating? So that is what is to be understood, because otherwise what happens is, if fear is the one which is dominating, then you are operating through the fear, and it is not allowing you to progress from a spiritual perspective. You have to understand the nature of things. Doing things perfectly, doing them on time, doing them well are all good things. But if the motive behind that is fear or appreciation, if the motive is that somebody is going to insult me, or I'll feel bad, or I'll get insulted, then you have to examine the question at a deeper level and see what is it that is actually causing the fear. What is it that is causing you to desire appreciation, or what is the driving force for it? That needs to be very carefully examined. Otherwise, what happens is they will continue to dominate your activity. You understand the point? Hello? Are you there, Parth? Yeah. The example is has no relevance to others. Yeah, right. I'm only trying to explain. Then we come to the question by Mr. Ramesh Puttanna. Sir, in your previous session, you mentioned that if one can control what one takes into one's mouth, and also what once comes out from amongst the 90 to 95% of our spiritual, can please explain more clearly how just these two things? See, what comes out of our mouth in the form of words is the activity of the mind. If there is a control on that, it means it's a control on the mind. And progressively, the lesser you talk, the more clarity the mind has. Otherwise, the mind is crowded by thoughts. And those thoughts want expression. So one wants to talk, one wants to speak out and say something. And we have an opinion about everything. Generally, it is said by psychologists that an average person has about 50,000 to 80,000 thoughts every day. Now, can we reduce it to 10 or 20 or 100? Which appears to be impossible, but there is a possibility of doing it. There is a possibility of doing it by first starting by not talking. I need not have an opinion about anything and everything on the surface of the earth. I need not respond verbally to everything. I need not even think about most of the things which are there, which are causing distraction. So don't even think about it. Don't discuss. Don't see. The first thing is, the best thing would be to switch off WhatsApp, to exit out of it, or to exit out of all these social media things from a purely spiritual point of view. But if you think that you will be missing out something, if you are not, if you don't read the paper, or if you don't have the watch the TV or something. See, my inspiration is Mr. Umesh Dhagat. See, he about 3 years back he told me, "Sir, I don't have a TV at home and I don't get a newspaper." So when it is possible for Umesh ji, why is it not possible for me? So I also I don't have a TV now. So gone. 90% of nonsense is gone. I don't get a newspaper. Even if I get a newspaper, my only interest is Sudoku and crossword puzzle to spend some leisure time. So you can. It is we who can reduce our things by these two things. When you eat less, your health is 90% of the health is taken care of. When we talk less, 90% of the mental activity and our indulgence in things which are unnecessary are taken care of. So that is what that's a simple way of doing it, and very practical way of doing it. Start by switching off the TV. Sell away your TV. Don't watch the TV, especially news channels. Don't think about COVID. Don't think about the coronavirus. Don't think about so many things which are irrelevant to us. Lead a secluded, happy life. Lagvashi, Vivikta Sevi. These are the two terms that are used in the Bhagavad Gita. Lagvashi, one who eats very little quantity. Vivikta Sevi, one who is secluded, unconnected with many things, many people, many aspects, many activities, unconnected with most of these things, you can happily be there. And those are the requirements or qualifications that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. I don't remember I think it's the 13th chapter or so, where he very clearly says that these are the two things, Lagvashi and Vivikta Sevi. Eating less just to keep the body and the soul together, to put it in the normal English, and talking less. In fact, I knew a gentleman, Professor C.S. Raghavan. He would speak to you once in a week. I asked his son also, "Does your father always remain like this?" He said, "Yes." "How frequently do you interact?" He says, "Once a week." And that too for very mundane things. If he wants some small help or something like that, he would talk. A very wise man. And incidentally, when due to age, he had another great advantage because he was deaf also. So great advantage, you don't listen to the nonsense, you simply remove that and put it as and when required if you want to listen to something or listen to somebody. So what happens? Another faculty gone. Better for us from the spiritual point of view. So he was literally deaf and dumb. He was a very mild gentleman, a professor of mathematics, and a very knowledgeable and a very wise man. A fellow like me who is interested in going on talking, I would go to him and seek clarification. And he was so gentle and mild that when I was talking something, if I make a mistake, he would not point out in front of everybody. He would call me personally and say, "See, you mentioned that particular statement when you were giving a talk. That statement is not entirely correct, or that statement has got this additional dimension to it." So it's such, I have actually literally seen such people. And why can't we become like that? It's not something impossible. So it is. These are the two things which are, as I said, what you consume and what you speak. If these two things are controlled, there will be a great change in ourselves. And you can practically start implementing now itself. Then there is some other question about this session. They say that when the soul gets released from the body during the one gets to witness the experiences. Sir, See, this happens. There are some references to this where this actually doesn't happen in time, as we understand. It is in a different dimension of time. There are cases of near-death experiences and other things. I think there is some reference in the Theosophical literature also about this, but let us not bother about it. Let's not bother much about it. As and when we meet our death, we will experience it and we will know it. This is actually, they say this process happens whereby when the body is being separated, for the vasanas to become dormant and the samskaras to be retained in the causal body, there is a process that goes about, which is called as this a kind of movie reel of our entire life. In a fraction of a second we see. Actually, the fraction of a second is a wrong thing, because it's not in the time dimension as we understand, but it is said that it will be at an astral dimension of time where it can happen. But I'm not very sure about it, but there are references in the scriptures about it. Okay. So I hope there are no more questions, or somebody, we have another 2-3 minutes to go. Our session is from 11:30 to 1. Okay.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions if you have any questions.
If somebody wants to ask any question, if no question, then also it's fine.